Welcome to the Speak with People podcast, where we believe that healthy communication is the key to unlocking your leadership potential. We are the go-to resource for leaders looking to greatly improve their communication skills, whether it's one-on-one interactions, team settings, public speaking, or your digital communication. By improving these skills, leaders can create stronger connections and drive positive change within their organization. Each and every episode, we sit down with leaders from various fields, just like you're grabbing a cup of coffee with them. We dive into real, practical conversations. Our goal is to help you transform your communication skills so you can lead more effectively, build stronger relationships, and make a lasting impact. So grab your favorite drink, settle in, and let's learn together. Well, how do you turn your customers into super fans? And then how do you turn your super fans into people who advocate for your brand? I bet your business would love a dedicated group of super fans. I mean, who wouldn't? And that's what we're talking about today on the Speak with People podcast. I am interviewing a legend. I have been looking forward to this podcast. I reached out. She graciously said yes. I was so terribly excited that I get to speak with someone who is an incredible leader and is really an amazing voice in this arena of leadership. Her name is Brittany Hodak. She's the author of Creating Super Fans. And today we're going to talk about her experience. We're going to talk about her wisdom as we talk about turning customers into those advocates. Brittany, thank you so much and welcome to the Speak with People podcast.
Thank you so much, Jason, for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
Absolutely. Well, before we hop in and we have a great conversation about this area, why don't you take our listeners into a little bit more of your story, who you are, what you do, what got you to this place?
So I became a customer experience speaker, totally by accident. This was never part of the plan. I, like probably a lot of people, grew up wanting to work in the entertainment business. All I wanted to do was work in the music industry. That was all I wanted to do from the time I was tiny. I didn't know if I was going to be in a band or manage a band or do publicity for a band, but I knew it would be something in the entertainment industry. So when I was 16, I got my first job as a radio station mascot. I started doing like music blogging after that. I interned at a ton of labels and a ton of music magazines, anybody who would have me bouncing back and forth between where I lived in Arkansas and New York City and LA. And finally, when I was 26, after I graduated and moved to the city, worked for a couple of different entertainment companies, launched my own entertainment company. And I was incredibly fortunate that my first client was Walmart. I sort of, hit a grand slam pitching them and getting them to agree to work with me. And it made it really easy for people to take my calls when I said, hey, Walmart wanted me to call you to see if you would maybe want to work with me to sell a couple 100,000 copies of a Justin Bieber thing or a Taylor Swift thing or a Katy Perry thing. So I was incredibly fortunate to get to work with all of when I say every superstar on the planet, like nearly every superstar on the planet. And as a 26-year-old kid, right, when I started in the business. So kind of fell in love with these problems that I kept hearing from the client side, whether that was Walmart or whether that was this big CPG brands we were working with. Because every time we did a big project, we would bring in Coke or Pepsi or Unilever or Johnson & Johnson or LG or, whatever brand it was. And as I was thinking through the problems that they were trying to solve, I started seeing all of these parallels to everything that I'd grown up with in entertainment and music, which was really, how do I get someone to choose me instead of someone else? How do I get your attention? How do I get your time? How do I get your money? How do I get you to choose me? And so I started to think about the intersection and how these were two totally different worlds, but whether you're trying to sell a song or like spaghetti sauce, you're trying to answer these same questions. So I went back to school, I got a master's in marketing and consumer behavior, and I really started to study the psychology behind what makes someone not just want to give you money, but like love to give you money, excited, wants to tell all their friends, wants to be a part of it. And I think because my dad worked in customer service growing up and I sort of fell in love with what he was doing in customer service, that was the big light bulb moment for me. Was like, it's all about the experience. Every problem I've been trying to solve my whole life could be solved looking through the lens of customer experience. And so that's how I fell in love with this area. And that's why I'm so passionate about advocating, trying to get everybody else obsessed with customer experience too.
Wow. Wow. Amazing. Did you have any embarrassing starstruck moments, in there where you like spilled something or dropped something or, just were like taken so aback as you're in the
Yeah,
presence of someone?
I definitely like wasn't as cool as I could have been with some people. And it's so funny. So here's the thing about meeting celebrities. It does not matter how big of a celebrity somebody is. It only matters how big a celebrity they are to you. Like,
Oh,
Jason, you could go meet the most famous person on the planet. And if you don't care about what they do, you're just like, it's another person.
right.
Cool, you just signed $1 billion contract to play soccer or basketball or whatever. But like if you don't care who that person is, it's not like meeting a celebrity.
Yep.
So the ones that I always had to work the hardest to like keep my cool with were the ones who I grew up idolizing. And I was fortunate enough to work with so many people that I grew up adoring, and I will say like varying degrees of being able to keep it together. I will tell you, the first time I met Dolly, we had worked on a project together, and I talked to her on the phone a couple of times, and I'd emailed back and forth with her team a bunch, but we hadn't met. And I flew down from New York to Nashville because she was filming Larry King and she was doing all of this promo, and I was like, well, I want to be down there. And so I flew to Nashville, and Dolly's manager introduced me and said, this is Brittany. She's the founder of Zine Pack. She's the one who worked with you on your deluxe album. And Dolly just started saying how much she loved it, how beautiful it was, how she had asked for extra copies for her sister and her pastor and all these people. And she said, you're just such a beautiful writer. And I'm just such a fan of everything you did. And, would you work with me on another project? And she started telling me about this other project. And it was all I could do to not start bawling. Like it was so overwhelming. And I think I said something like, Dolly, I'll write your shopping list. Like I'll do anything you want. Like whatever you want to do. And I went back to my car. I like excused myself from the set. I went outside and I just started bawling
Oh my
because I was
goodness.
so completely overwhelmed. And I called my husband and I'm like, and Dolly, and he's like, oh my God, are you okay? Like, were you in a car wreck? Like, what? I can't understand you. You're like sobbing hysterically. And I was like, no, it was Dolly. So that one I did not keep my chill. There were some others that I was equally uncool. That was probably like that was the only one where my husband like thought I had been in a car accident because of my reaction.
you were
Um,
you were so emotionally wrecked.
yeah, but there were definitely times I was like not as cool in person as I could have been. But then again, other times it's like you meet people and I never cared when we were working with like Justin Bieber or the Jonas Brothers or other teen idols because like I know it's like, oh, it's just like a kid, like you're just another kid.
Oh man, if I walked into a room and I had to work with Darius Rucker, I would be a mess. I would be a complete mess.
So do you want to hear a story about
Oh,
Darius?
all right. Love it.
All right. So my friend Annie, who is a brilliant writer, she and I knew each other years ago when she was in New Jersey, and she had this blog called You Sing, I Write. And she was a big country fan, and I was living in Manhattan, and we became friends and met at shows. And she moved to Nashville like a year before I did. And she was doing her first big presser where she was like in the room for a press conference with Darius. And she kept like kind of politely raising her hand, trying to get called on. And all of the more senior journalists were kind of like shouting out their questions and getting picked and getting picked. And the publicist was like, okay, no more. And she, was like a little disappointed that she hadn't got to answer her question. And Darius said, no, no, no. What's your name? Like you've been so
Oh,
polite this whole time. You've been trying to get a question. And she was so happy and so excited that Darius, said, no, I want to answer one more question. And that was part of her deciding to move to Nashville because she thought, oh, maybe everybody in Nashville really is as nice and polite as everybody says they are. And now it's funny because she's had the opportunity to work with Darius a ton of times and she's told him that story. And so I know she wouldn't mind me sharing it.
oh,
But yeah, Darius is a great guy.
oh, that's incredible. Only 23 more days till the Hootie and the Blowfish concert in Tampa. So I am
There you
I'm
go.
counting down and ready to go. Boy, I'm so curious. I have millions of questions to ask you about the topic that we talked about, but even it's just so curious as someone who's started a business, those early days when you started your entertainment company, were there were there a few skills that you had, or were there some tools that you used that you look back and go, oh my goodness, every entrepreneur, every business owner they need to do these things? Or, was it like you're learning as you go? I would love to just pick your brain on that.
I was absolutely learning as I go, which in hindsight, I think was a huge benefit because so I started my company 15 years ago, which doesn't seem like that long, but also seems like an eternity. And if you think about 15 years ago and like 20 years ago, when I was graduating college, we didn't glamorize entrepreneurs. Like nobody was like, I want to grow
Right.
up and become an entrepreneur, right? Like that wasn't a thing. And so I didn't know how hard it was to start a business. I didn't know the failure rate of startups. I didn't know any of it. I was just like,
Mm,
well,
right.
every company I've ever heard of was started by somebody, so it can't be that hard. Like every company had to start somewhere, right? So I think the ignorance was definitely a benefit. Um, like I didn't know you couldn't just like call Walmart and
Right.
pitch an idea. So I think that definitely worked in my favor. And then the other thing was just an inability to synthesize the word no as a final answer. And
Wow.
I remember reading somewhere that you should never take no for an answer from anybody who lacks the final authority to tell you yes. So every no on that ladder is just one more like, okay, well, I
Wow.
guess I'm going to have to come at it more creatively. And I think I learned very quickly that the higher up I could approach somebody, the fewer gatekeepers there were telling me
Oh,
no. And I was
yes.
like, well, I'm a CEO. Why can't I talk to the other CEO? Even though I was, 26, 27 years old and I was going to the CEOs of, billion-dollar companies in some
Oh,
cases, I was like, well, that's just another person. And so I think that really set me apart where a lot of my peers who were like, well, we've got to go through the proper channels of talking to 11 different people. And
yep.
I was always like, well, why would you want to have to convince 11 people when you could just convince the one that's going to make the decision and then he'll just tell the other 10 what to do? And so I think that, again, like maybe not the right business decorum, but I didn't know any better. I was just
Yeah.
like, well, why not? Like, why do I want to call all those people and wait 7 months for somebody to tell me yes if I could just call that person? And I learned very quickly that the fastest way to get in a room with anybody you want is to make them want to get in a room with you. So I was
Wow.
like, what do I need to do to where these people will not just take my call out of a sense of obligation, but will be excited to talk to me? Like, what do I need to do? How do I need to build my resume, my persona to where they're like, oh, yeah, I'm very interested in talking to this person?
Wow. My goodness. I mean, that's like a masterclass in and of itself, for our leaders. Oh my goodness. Because I mean, so many of us, right? The first bit of, no or pressure or it's not going to work out, we're done. We just kind of move on. Or some of us, not that I have an experience in this, even if we anticipate a no, we don't even move any further. Do you think some of that? I'll use the word tenacity. You could correct me if that's the wrong word. Tenacity or that ability to kind of keep moving forward. Was that taught to you as a kid? Is that something you had to? Was there an adversity that you overcame? Is it a mindset shift? I'm just so curious what you would say.
I will accept the word tenacity. Thank you. That's a good word. I'm sure a lot of it was in the way that I was raised, but also it was a mindset. Like I remember trying to gamify it. Like I at one point was being told no so often that it became a challenge. Like, can I be told no more times today than yesterday? And I'll never forget the first time somebody who had said no to me called me like 3 months later and was like, hey, I'm like, we can do it now. Like, we couldn't do it before, but we can do it now. And I
Yes.
started to think about every single one of those no's is somebody that knows I exist now.
Yep.
Like, before, they didn't know who I was. They didn't know that I could help them, but now they
Wow.
do. No today isn't a no forever. And so I made a no chart. Like I literally wrote the word no
Wow.
on a sheet of paper and drew lines and started making tally marks. And every time I got to 10 no's, I went and bought myself something. And sometimes it was like an ice cream cone. We were
Wow.
right on top of a McDonald's. So I would like go down and get McDonald's ice cream sometimes. Or, like sometimes it was I'm gonna order a purse or get a pair of shoes or
Yep.
whatever. But every time I got to 10 no's, I was like, that's 10 more people who said not today, but maybe tomorrow.
Wow. I mean, yeah. Wow, you just took us on a incredible leadership lesson there.
Make a
Just
no-chart
absolutely
and buy
amazing.
yourself ice cream and shoes. Hopefully,
Right?
that's what everybody took out of that. No, because it is, it's like it sucks
Right.
when somebody tells you no in the moment,
Right.
but then when they reach back out later, or to say like, if you understand why it's a no, but in your head you might be thinking, well, that's a cool solution for somebody but not me.
Yeah.
Who does that person know that they can now go talk about you to someone else who might be a better customer? And that's
Yeah.
the whole principle behind my book, Creating Superfans, is how do we create people that are excited to share our story, to talk about what we're doing, so that they're out there helping us create more customers, like without us even asking them to.
Wow.
So I think a lot of that was sort of the precursor to me thinking about customer experience as such a wonderful acquisition tool for customers.
Wow. So what are some of those primary pillars that we have to do to help grow our customer base so they get to that place where they want to advocate for us?
Well, one of the things that I always say is super fans are created at the intersection of your story and every customer story.
Mm.
And the reason this is true is because one of the biggest threats that exists to businesses, I believe, is something that's not on a lot of people's radar, and that's apathy. Like a lot of times we say, oh, not enough people know what I'm doing. When in reality, lots of people know. They just don't care
Oh,
because you haven't given them a reason to care. You haven't
right.
connected what you do with their life in a way that makes them think, oh, I get it. I need this. So it's an apathy problem. So my book, Creating Superfans, and a lot of the work that I have done over the past several years is all about how to distill all of the things that I've learned about sales, marketing, operations, customer service, systems into a customer experience model. So I call that model the super model because it's funny. And also because it's simple to remember. And if you want to create amazing customer experiences, you've got to come up with a plan that's simple to remember, simple to get your team aligned around, simple to measure, and most importantly, simple to do. So the super model is how you create super fans. And super is an acronym, and we can
Mm.
go quickly through each pillar if you want, or bounce around to talk about any that you want. But this is the answer to your question. These are the 5 things you need to do. S, start with your story. Because
Mm.
if you don't know why you deserve super fans, I promise you no one else is ever going to be able to figure it out. You understand your customer story. What is it that they need that you can deliver in a way that connects your story with theirs, in a way that makes you not just a commodity provider, but a category of one? P, personalize. What are the high tech and high touch ways that you make them feel like the most important customer that you have? E, exceed expectations. How are you intentional about the experiences that you're designing so they're not neutral or negative, but more often positive? And then finally, R, repeat. That's about putting the systems and processes in place that you need so that there is repetition in the way people experience your business. It doesn't matter what person on the team they talk to, what day of the week, what day of the month, etc. There's always going to be a predictably, consistently amazing experience.
Wow. Wow. That's incredible. Was there a moment where in some of your research with the customer behavior and some of the customer issues that you were looking over, where you found a company that you just went, how are they successful when they don't really seem to be, you know, employing any of, you know, trying not to have you throw somebody under the bus, but you know, it's always
Oh,
curious to learn
I'll
from.
totally throw people under a bus. It's fine. Yeah, it's funny because it's a lot of utility providers, right, who have somewhat of a monopoly.
Mm,
It's a lot of the kind of like churn and burn, like cell carriers, right? Like you need a cell phone carrier, right?
yep.
Most people, at least in the United States, right, like
Yep.
need cell phone service. So companies that can cycle through them, um, and treat you like a commodity instead of a customer, treat you like a number, treat you like somebody who doesn't really matter. And then also a lot of the like low cost, like there's this misconception that you can't be inexpensive and also provide a great customer experience, which you absolutely can,
Mm,
right? You look at Southwest Airlines, you look at Chick-fil-A, you look at other category leaders who, even though they are not the most expensive in their peer set, they try really hard to have a focus on customer experience and employee experience compared to competitors within the same category. So there absolutely are leaders and there are laggards. And what's really interesting is there have been a lot of studies done over the years that look at the stock price of companies that are considered to excel in customer experience versus those who don't do a great job. And always, like, the correlation is 100%. The companies that do better make more money. The
Wow.
companies that provide better customer and employee experience are more successful long term. But in corporate America, and this is like a total different tangent, but in corporate America, you have so many people that are beholden not to their customers or their employees, but to their shareholders. And they're so focused on this quarter's results and this month's numbers and what the balance sheet can look like. And so you've got these accountants that are making all of the decisions instead of people who are thinking about what's best for the customers and employees. And, you know, what's the saying, like, cut off your nose to spite your face. It's like you can have both short-term and long-term profit and profitability, but you have to focus on long-term. You have to focus on doing what's
Wow.
right for your customers, because
Right.
it's only then that you're going to be able to also excel in the short term.
Yeah. Whew. When I think of super fans, obviously, because I love Hootie and the Blowfish and Darius, I think, wow, us fans are something else. But as I think of super fans, I mean, maybe talk to us a second about, the crazy success of Taylor Swift and how she's created, just massive super fans. I mean, when you think about, you know, giant, like how does somebody go from, singing songs on a stage at a country music festival with 17 people to packing out stadiums around the world? I mean, that's got to be like some type of lesson in super fans.
Here's how you do it. You do it one customer at a time, one
Wow.
experience at a time, one
Yep.
interaction at a time. And in my book, I tell a story about the first time I met Taylor. She was 17 years old. She had just won her first ever televised award. It was for Breakthrough Music Video of the Year at the CMT Awards. And we were at an after party together. I was maybe 23. Um, and she was talking about how excited she was. And she was there with an artist who I knew because I'd interned at his label in college. And I was talking to her about everything she was doing on MySpace, because at the time the music trades were starting to like kind of talk about it. And
Yep.
she said, I know that before people are going to fall in love with my music, like, they have to know me, and they're not going to
Wow.
care about me until I care about them. So she was on a mission to make 1 million people know that she cared about them.
Wow.
She was asking about what was happening at school, talking to them about their lives, talking to them about all of the things happening, in the hopes that they would be like, who is this girl Taylor? And check out her music, listen to her songs. So she knew that she had to do it one person at a time. And it was about all of the autographs that she was signing. It was about all those conversations she was having, all of those chats she was having. And she was doing all of her own socials. She wasn't letting anybody else touch it. It wasn't like, let's reach as many people as possible. I'm going to get 30 people out here to botify my account. It
Yep.
was her one-to-one interactions. And so I define a super fan as a customer or stakeholder who's so delighted by the experience they have with the brand, product, or service that they become an enthusiastic advocate. So there's three
Wow.
parts to that. It's a customer who has a great experience and wants to tell their friends. And that is exactly what Taylor did from day one. That's the playbook. And what's so incredible about the phenomenon that is Swifties across the globe is the community that they feel with each other. And that idea of connecting your story to your customer story, or in this case, to your fan story, is what has propelled Taylor into the cultural force that she is. But it's also what makes it so fun to be a fan, because there's this communal aspect. And when you are a Swiftie, right, like, that's more of a uniting factor than anything else can be a dividing factor, because you feel like you have this kinship, this oneness with those other fans.
Wow. Wow. I love that. What are some of the primary mistakes companies make then? I know we've hit on a couple of them, but are there some giant glaring ones that, business owners listening, entrepreneurs, we got to steer clear of these, right away?
Yeah, one is always feeling like you can control the narrative because you can't. We
Mm.
live in a world where your brand isn't what you say it is, it's what your customers tell their friends,
Wow.
and that's
Wow.
a reality, and I think it's a reality that a lot of people have been slow to embrace and wanna still kinda, like, be in denial about, but, like, the perception of your audience is your reality as a brand.
Wow.
And so I think that's a big one that people are like, "Our brand is our logo and our colors and our website and our Super Bowl commercial." And it's like, "No, no, it's not. It's what people are DMing each other about you. It's what somebody says or doesn't say
Yep.
after they leave," right? Like if they walk into your store and think that sucks and then they never go back, like that is your brand. So I would say that's a big one.
Oh, that's incredible. Uh, it, it's hilarious sometimes. I mean, when we think like our story is what ultimately matters, instead of getting inside of our clients or our customer story and learning everything we can about that. I mean, just even the story that you just told us about Taylor, how important is it, and how much time should companies, business owners be investing in doing the customer research, getting inside of all of that, like even understanding their customer behaviors. Even as you're talking, my brain is like swirling with, wait a minute, I think I know my customer. I think, do I know what, flavor ice cream they, I want to know, like I want to know my customer so, well, that maybe I'm like maybe close to a stalker, but maybe not that deep. But how
Well,
walk us into that. How can we get to know our customer even better?
so a mistake that a lot of people make is they think that customer research is a phase that starts and ends, and then once it ends, then you go make decisions. It's not. It has to be a two-way conversation. It has to be a two-way street. It has to be a never-ending relationship where you're listening, you're learning, you're trying new things, you're listening to what they say about the new things, you're learning, like it has to be
Yep.
an endless loop. And that is a mistake that I think a lot of people make is like, oh, I'll just do some focus groups. I'll do this or that. Here's the thing about humans. We'd love to tell you what we think. You just have to ask.
Mm,
And sometimes you don't even have to ask. You just have to like look on the internet, right? Like if you're fortunate enough to where you have a brand that people are talking about already, go see what they're saying and then invite them into the conversation and have an actual two-way conversation instead of just sort of like lurking on social media. But yeah, no, you should always be getting to know your customers better. You should always be learning more about them, both at the individual level and in aggregate, so that you can do a better job meeting and exceeding their needs.
I love that. Can a company turn it around? Say they've done a poor job for a while, the story's gotten out. It's funny. I was not too long ago, last month in New Jersey, was training a group of financial advisors, and I was sponsored by another company. And I said, "Well, have you used this company for their products?" And they're like, there was a customer service problem a couple of years ago. I mean, it was like 3 years ago, and they were still using that as a reason not to use them. Can, companies turn the narrative? Can they, once it kind of goes to the deep end of the bad, can they kind of climb back out and fix it again?
It's a great question, and the short answer is absolutely yes. So, there's a whole chapter in the book where I talk about this phenomenon called the service recovery paradox, where essentially says and there are lots of studies that have been done, over time. I think they actually coined this phrase back in the '70s, but there have been a lot of studies that have replicated this. When a customer has a bad experience and you fix it, they actually end up being more satisfied and having a higher lifetime value than if nothing had gone wrong in the first place. Now, this does not mean you should intentionally like mess stuff up and fix it. But what it does mean is that if you can recover, then you are likely to receive some grace from the customer who says they messed up, nobody's perfect. They cared enough to fix it and leave me better than they found me.
Mm,
So in the book, I talk about how there's actually 5 steps to a proper apology and what that looks like,
yes.
and how you need to, focus on apologizing, because if you do correctly apologize and atone for whatever you've done wrong, and then make the necessary adjustments within your organization, you can keep that customer. Now if it's a situation like the one where you described, number one is like, does that company know, do they have any idea why they lost that customer? Maybe they
Right.
don't, because a lot of times customers just leave, they don't tell you why. They're like, it's
Right.
not my job to make you better. Like, why do I care if you know why you lost me or not? It is so much easier to just go find another solution than it is to say, hey, I care enough to help you try to get better. So when a customer says, I need to talk to you about this problem, or I have this issue, like that is such a blessing because they're telling you that they care enough to give you a chance to make it right for them to stay, which a huge majority of customers do not do. The overwhelming majority of people just peace out because it is
Right.
so easy to find a competitor. So the number one thing is, does that company know they lost that customer? And if they do they know why? And if they
Wow.
do, then in that case, it sounds like it's a very B2B, like consultative situation. There absolutely has to be a conversation of somebody reaching out saying, hey,
Yep.
I know we lost your business and we want to earn it back.
Yep.
And I want you to help us understand what we did so that we know if there's an opportunity to earn it back and then you have to give them a payoff
Yeah.
because we truly believe we could do a better job than XYZ is doing, or because we truly believe that there is such a great connection between your company and ours. So
Yep.
you've got to actively go to them, make the case, ask if you can like earn the right to try to get their business back, and then listen to everything that they say. So it's not a lost cause forever,
Yeah.
but that customer is probably not coming back on their own. You now have to like outbound try to get them because
Yeah.
in their mind, you suck forever until you prove them otherwise, until you give them a
Right.
reason to believe that you don't suck anymore.
And it's amazing, the right, I mean, Will Guidara talks about it in Unreasonable Hospitality. People love to be pursued, right? So like you pursue them a little bit, and even after they go scorched earth on you with like the worst review, like I just don't even get me started on Facebook groups. I'm like, people are like, oh, I had the worst burger. I'll never go to McDonald's again like over one burger that's bad. And they talk all of this crap. But then it could be a week later and they're like, yeah, I ran into the manager and they apologized. I love that McDonald's. I mean, they can go so scorched earth and then still come back. Like it's just a riot, especially with social media. Like, how do companies, and we'll end with this question. I mean, it's just like, how do companies make sure they're communicating in a healthy way with all of the crazy loads of unflattering comments now on social media? Because it seems like it's probably, there's not as many, oh, we love your business, we love your company, we love you, we love you. It's more of like, for instance, I'm capitalizing our time here, but I saw a Hertz ad the other day. I got a speaking engagement next week. I thought, well, I'll book Hertz because it gives me Marriott points. And then I clicked on the ad and the comments were just filled with, this is trash, this is horrible. What can companies do in 2024 and beyond, to be able to change that narrative a little bit?
So a few things. Number one is everybody on your team needs to know that their title is acting chief of experience. I
Ooh.
don't care what your actual title is. I don't care what department you're in. You're in the experience department. Congratulations. You are the person who controls a lot of like what those narratives become, right? Because the overwhelming majority of people who complain on social media don't just complain about the product or service, they complain about the experience.
Right.
It wasn't just what was delivered to them, it was how it was delivered to them. Somebody was rude, somebody was short, somebody was angry, somebody didn't know their job, right? So it starts with training. And then the next part is you have to be prepared to respond very quickly, like as close
Mm,
to instantaneously as possible across every channel where people are, whether they are coming directly to you or whether they're just complaining about you. You should be monitoring. There's tons of social monitor tools out there that you can use to act on opportunities that come up because you're paying attention to what people are saying. So you have to be able to quickly respond, and you have to do it in a way that's going to de-escalate the situation, affirm that that person matters to you as a customer, and then offer
wow.
some sort of resolution to them.
Wow. That's
I'm
so
so
good.
sorry that happened. Thank you for sharing it. I'm going to send you a DM because we would love to make this right and hope we'll get the privilege of welcoming you back as a customer soon. Please check your DMs or whatever.
Wow. Wow. Boy, that's so powerful. That's so powerful. Well, what I loved about your book, and I've actually put a couple of your quotes in one of my keystone messages is speak with your client, not at them. That I gave it to a friend and they haven't given it back yet. So I have one on order. I can't wait to give it out to our Speak with People community because I mean, just literally every page is just so rich, filled with such great insights and advice. Thank you so much. Before we end, I did want to ask you a couple of rapid fire questions because we're building this online library for leaders and communicators who want new ideas, fresh people to listen to. And so I ask all of our guests, is there a speaker? Is there a speaker that you just, boy, every time you listen to them, he or she, they just knock it out of the park, fill your cup, can't wait to share that talk with someone? Is there somebody in that category for you?
Yeah, my favorite speaker is probably a guy. I think I have his book right. This is his book. His name is Phil Jones, and he wrote this book, Exactly What to Say, and he's brilliant. I have seen him speak several times. I would go watch him speak like once a week if I could. He is just one of the smartest people I've ever met and brilliant. And there's not a single person on the planet who doesn't need to read his book, because if you use words, then Phil can help make the words you use more impactful and more powerful. So go by Exactly What to Say. And even if you use words that aren't in English, this book has been translated into like 30 different languages. So.
I love it. So is there a
thank you.
book then? Is that the book you would recommend to leaders if they're about to be stranded on a desert island? Like, you got to read this book. Is that the book, or would you give another one?
I mean, if you were stranded on a desert island, no, I would probably look for a book with like island survival tips to offer rather than one about sales language.
Yes, thank you.
Unless you're trying to like persuade someone to stop at your island and pick you up. I will tell you this. I just listened, there's a podcast that I love. I just interviewed the host on my own podcast, Creating Superfans, but this podcast is called Everything Everywhere Daily. And the guy, Gary Arndt, who hosted, is like the most fascinating human. And every day he does a 12-minute episode on something. And there's like no through line other than it's incredibly interesting and fascinating. And if you're a curious person, you should listen to this podcast. And I'm not like usually a podcaster. Like, I read so much more than I listen to podcasts, but I'm going to answer the question, because if you're stranded on a desert island, this is a great one to have, assuming you can keep your phone charged, because he has done over 1,500 episodes on space and science and mathematics and history and just everything you could ever want to know about, including he did one recently on what is the most remote island on the planet where people live, and it was incredibly fascinating to talk about how hard it is to get there because they don't have like an airstrip. There's only like 100 people that live on the island, and they've been there now for a couple hundred years. Very fascinating.
Wow, amazing. Well, before we end, where's the best place we can send our listeners to find out more about you, learn more about what you do, all that kind of stuff?
You can find everything at BrittanyHodak.com.
BrittanyHodak.com. Well, we will definitely put that in the show notes, in our Speak with People Facebook group. And Brittany, I just can't thank you enough. I feel like I could do round 2 right now with about 30 different questions just on this, and then maybe part 3 on speaker questions, because, I just so appreciate you answering a few of my questions before we started.
Well, I guess you're gonna have to invite me back then.
Okay, perfect. Sounds great. And when I'm in, I'm trying to think of when I'm in Nashville again. Anyways, but so appreciate you and what you bring to the world. And thank you so much for sharing your insights with us.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you for listening to the Speak with People podcast, where we believe that healthy communication is the key to unlocking your leadership potential. Thank you for leaving a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And thank you for every like and every comment. Every single time you cut and copy a link and send it to a coworker or a friend, it absolutely means the world, and it helps each other transform our communication skills. Lastly, don't forget about a great resource that's available to you: our communication skills library. At the end of every episode, we ask each guest their favorite speaker, their favorite podcast, their favorite book, and we've compiled all of those resources together to give you an amazing library to continue your growth and development. Thank you again for being a listener and for being a part of the Speak with People community.